The first thing my new mountain home ever got in the mail wasn't a welcome to the neighborhood card. It was a $14,000 fine shoved under my front door like a threat. No stamp, no return address, just a stapled stack of paper that basically said, "Pay up in 48 hours or we'll ruin your life." And the insane part, I'd moved to the mountains specifically to get away from people who think they can police the color of your soul. For almost 20 years in California, it felt like living inside a fishbowl. Neighbors peeking over fences, cameras everywhere, drones buzzing like mosquitoes, and those HOA newsletters written in that cheerful, weaponized tone. We're just maintaining community standards, while they're basically measuring your grass with a ruler. I finally hit the point where I didn't want more space. I wanted less noise, less nonsense, less of other people's control. Then I saw the auction listing: foreclosed mountain property, 40 acres, cedar-framed house, detached garage, unincorporated land, and the words that made my brain go quiet for the first time in years: no community association. An independent green zone. I didn't even hesitate. I bought it, packed what mattered, and drove to Colorado like I was fleeing a bad relationship. The first 2 days up there felt unreal. Pine sap in the air, rain rolling in soft and slow, silence so deep you can hear your own thoughts come back with an echo. No meetings. No friendly reminders. No one telling me my porch light was non-compliant. I slept like a person again. On the third morning, I opened the door to let the cold air in, and saw a thick envelope wedged under the doorframe like a dirty secret. Inside was a notice of violation from something called the Green Hollow Preserve Homeowners Association. 3 infractions listed like I'd been running a junkyard: unapproved residential structure, visible construction materials, heavy equipment operation without notification. The total at the bottom was so bold it looked like it was yelling, $14,000. Due in 48 hours. Or, quote, legal escalation will commence. And there it was at the bottom, a neat looping signature like it practiced in the mirror: Karen Jenis, President. I stood there in my kitchen, holding that paper, waiting for the punchline, like maybe my friends had somehow arranged a prank from 2 states away. But my stomach did that slow twist it does when your body knows something your brain doesn't want to admit yet. Because the document had my name, my address, parcel ID, all of it. It looked official enough to make you second-guess your own reality. So I did what any paranoid former tech guy does. First I Googled it. And yeah, there was a website. Polished. Emerald logos. Stock photos of happy families walking golden retrievers. Big phrases like community excellence and architectural integrity. Even an interactive map. Here's the problem. Their development ended about half a mile downhill from me. Neat rows of tan-roofed houses, manicured lawns, perfect little fences, and then past a rocky creek and thick forest, my land. Completely separate. Impossible to accidentally confuse. Still, the letter had an embossed seal in green foil. Not junk mail. Not random. It felt deliberate. I called the number printed in bold. A robotic voice chirped. "Thank you for contacting Green Hollow Preserve Homeowners Association. Our offices are currently closed. No extension. No person. Just a wall." So I left a voicemail that started polite and ended less polite. Then I scanned every page, saved it as a PDF, and emailed it to my attorney in Denver with the subject line: "You're not going to believe this." I tried to unpack, tried to pretend I wasn't rattled, but every time I looked at that envelope on the counter it felt like a threat pretending to be paperwork. Later that evening I stepped outside to clear my head. The air smelled like wet pine and dirt. The driveway was gravel, the kind that crunches loud enough to warn you somebody's coming. Down by the mailbox, I noticed fresh tire marks in the dust, 2 sets, wide like a small SUV. Nobody should have been up there. My nearest neighbor was almost a mile away. That's when the irritation cooled into something sharper. Whoever did this didn't misdeliver a letter. They drove up to my home on purpose. The next morning I skipped breakfast, threw on a flannel, and went straight into town to the county recorder's office. It was in this faded brick building that looked like a library from the outside. Quiet beige walls, too many ferns, that kind of place where you can almost hear paperwork aging. I handed the woman at the front desk my address and asked to see the current boundaries of my parcel. She typed for a while, her face doing that slow shift from neutral to confused. Then she frowned and said, "That's odd." "Odd how?" "There was an update to your parcel boundary 4 days ago." My heart dropped like a cinder block. She turned the monitor toward me, and there it was, my land outlined in red, and hugging the lower half of my property line like a fungus was a soft green overlay labeled Green Hollow Preserve HOA boundary. My house. My garage. A whole chunk of my forest suddenly highlighted as within their jurisdiction. I just stared, trying to speak around the dry lump in my throat. That's not right. That's one of the reasons I bought this place. She nodded slowly, like she'd seen this kind of slow-motion panic before. It looks like it was part of a requested expansion filed in person. Paper form. Signed and notarized. It states the parcel owner gave permission. I didn't sign anything, and I definitely didn't authorize an HOA expansion. She hesitated and said I could request a copy of the filing. I told her, I want it. Every page. And if you have any security footage of who submitted it, I want that too. 20 minutes later, she came back with a stapled packet. And let me tell you, it was worse than I expected. A standard boundary modification request, signed Jonathan L. Mason, with a signature that looked like mine if my hand was shaking, and I'd forgotten how letters worked. Attached to it was a notarized consent stamped and signed by someone named Richard A. Jenkins. I turned the page and my jaw locked, because the notary address listed on the form was on Willow Court, and Willow Court, in real life, was basically abandoned sheds and a forgotten propane depot. I'd driven past it days earlier. There was no office there. No business. Nothing. Then we pulled the visitor logs. A woman in a dark ball cap signed in Thursday, just after 2 p.m. She wrote Karen J. No ID scan because she left her license in the car, stayed 15 minutes, dropped off an envelope, and left. The staff didn't remember her, but the hallway camera did. Platinum blonde hair, peeking out under the cap. Sunglasses. Clipboard. She moved like a person who was used to walking into places and making other people accept whatever she said without question. I took a photo of the footage screen. Asked if they could export it. They told me I'd need to file a records request. So I filed it right there at the counter, hands shaking, half anger, half adrenaline. Back at the house, I called my attorney again, this time not polite at all, and emailed everything. The forged signature, the fake notary, the photo of Karen, the updated GIS map. Then I walked the southern boundary of my property, because I needed to see with my own eyes whether this was just digital, or if they'd already started marking my land. Sure enough, half hidden behind a pine tree, there was a freshly driven metal stake with a laminated HOA sign zip-tied to it. Property under review, Green Hollow Preserve. I ripped it off with both hands, yanked the stake out of the dirt, and tossed it into my truck bed like it was a dead animal. That wasn't a misunderstanding. That wasn't clerical error. That was a claim. That night I installed 2 cheap motion cameras, one over the porch, one facing the driveway. Then I sat on the porch steps in the dark, listening to the forest like it might warn me before humans showed up again. Crickets. Wind. Nothing else. The drone showed up just after sunrise. I was half awake, coffee in hand, when I heard the high-pitched whine overhead. At first I thought it was an insect, then a shadow drifted across my porch. I looked up, and there it was, a sleek quadcopter hovering 20 feet above my roof, rotating slowly like a predator deciding where to bite. I walked inside, grabbed my phone, hit record, and stepped back out. Morning, I muttered into the camera. Seems I have some uninvited guests. The drone tilted like it heard me, then slid toward the tree-line and hovered above the canopy, still watching. 10 minutes later, a black Audi Q7 rolled up my driveway, freshly washed, tinted windows, dealer plates, the kind of car that screams, I have spreadsheets for fun. The door opened and out stepped the same woman from the courthouse footage. Platinum blonde, sunglasses, business casual armor, tablet in hand, no smile, no wave, just purpose. Mr. Mason, she said like she owned the syllables. We need to have a serious conversation. I stayed where I was, 10 feet back, phone still recording. That's so. She gestured around like the forest was an eyesore only she could see. Your property is in violation of multiple Green Hollow Preserve ordinances. A drone survey confirmed unapproved structures, visible waste, and noise ordinance breaches. I'm here on behalf of the board to offer you one final opportunity to settle this amicably. I held my phone higher, making sure it caught her face. You're trespassing. You delivered an illegal fine, you faked a boundary expansion, you forged my signature, and now you're flying drones over my roof. Want to try that again, Karen? Her jaw tightened, but she didn't flinch. The HOA reserves the right to perform compliance overflights. Compliance overflights, I repeated, and I actually laughed because the audacity was almost artistic. You're not the Air Force. You have no jurisdiction here. She stepped closer, voice dropping like she was sharing a secret. Your documents won't hold. The board has already rear-reviewed the zoning map and passed an emergency amendment. Your lot falls within our new perimeter. You can file an objection, but until then, you are bound by the association's enforcement rights. And that's the moment it clicked. This wasn't about community standards. This was about absorption. A slow, dirty land grab dressed up as administration. I said, my attorney is already drafting a lawsuit. You're committing fraud. And now you're adding harassment and unauthorized aerial surveillance. She tried to swipe at my phone like a toddler grabbing a toy. I jerked back. Touch me or my equipment again, I said, quiet as ice, and I'll have you arrested. I pulled out my second phone and started dialing. She muttered something about escalation and strode back to her Audi. The drone vanished into the trees. By the time I finished reporting it to the sheriff's dispatcher, she was gone, but my footage was crystal clear. That afternoon, a patrol car came up the driveway. Deputy Hollis, early 30s, tired eyes, that looked like he'd already dealt with too many petty wars over property lines. He watched my clips, nodded, and said, "That's definitely not legal. We've had issues with this association before. Karen Jenis, she gets creative." "Creative," I repeated. "That's one word for it." He handed me a card. "We'll file the report. Put up no trespassing signs. Motion floodlights. Cameras." I stared at him for a second and almost smiled. Already done. Then my attorney finally called back. Carla Moreno, senior litigation partner, voice like gravel, reputation for skinning HOAs in court. She didn't waste time. "We've seen boundary scams," she said. "Usually they try it on the elderly. You're just lucky you're tech-savvy and angry." Angry doesn't cover it. Within a day her team discovered the notarized signature they used. Richard A. Jenkins belonged to a notary who'd been dead for 2 years. Dead. They filed documents notarized by a corpse. Then they ran the office address and found it didn't exist, just a boarded-up strip mall that had been gutted for years. And here came the twist that made my blood go cold. Carla's junior associate dug through older civil complaints and found a pattern. 2 board names had popped up before for trying to impose fines outside their jurisdiction. The cases fizzled because people moved away, gave up, didn't have money to fight, and Green Hollow Preserve kept expanding like mold. They weren't just bullying people. They were running a system. Carla filed a cease and desist and got a temporary injunction within 24 hours blocking HOA enforcement on my property. A judge actually wrote, "Reasonable suspicion of boundary manipulation." That same evening I found a new notice taped to my gate, bold red ink, rain-soaked and signed, threatening legal consequences. I bagged it like evidence. Then the intimidation started showing teeth. 2 plainclothes guys loitered near my driveway taking photos. One of my trail cams disappeared, ripped clean off a tree. Another camera got rotated to face dirt instead of the property line, like someone knew exactly how to blind it without breaking it. And then, around 3 a.m. one night, my backyard sensor lights flared. A neighbor's dog half a mile away went nuts. I checked the live feed, shadows shifting where shadows shouldn't shift. I ran outside with a flashlight, heart pounding so hard I could taste metal, and saw smoke curling up near my workshop. Someone had lit a fire under my stacked lumber. It hadn't fully caught yet, but it was smoldering, and the fire department later confirmed accelerant traces. That was the moment fear flipped into something else. Because paperwork scams are one thing, but fire? Fire is a message. The next morning I found a cracked drone casing tossed in the ditch by my driveway, scorched, half melted, like somebody tried to destroy it but wanted me to notice. I bagged it too. Then my neighbor Todd, lives across the ridge, called me and said, "Hey, your camera system acting weird? My outdoor feed got knocked out last night. Circuit box was tampered with. Clean-cut wires." So now it wasn't just me. They'd hit 2 properties in the same window. That's not coincidence. That's a crew. Todd came over before sundown with solar backup rigs and helped me set up extra lights. And I'll tell you something, when you're out in the dark running cables with a guy you barely know, and he doesn't ask for gossip, doesn't crack jokes, just quietly helps, that's when you remember not everyone is poison. Sometimes people are still people. That night, at 2:17 a.m., my motion alerts exploded. On the feed I saw 2 figures in hooded jackets duck behind my woodshed, one carrying something like a crowbar, the other a duffel. I hit the floodlights, and my backyard lit up like a prison yard. They froze, looked straight at the camera, and bolted. Except Todd, bless him, had parked his truck blocking the lower trail. One of the intruders tripped hard into brush. The other vanished into the trees. I ran out, flashlight in hand, adrenaline buzzing in my teeth, and by the time the police arrived I had one trespasser zip-tied by my fire pit. He wouldn't talk, just kept muttering. I was hired, I don't know nothing. But his phone did. Messages from a contact labeled KJ. Instructions like, ensure the site is cleared. Wipe all cams. No damage to the house. Target only the sheds. That's when Carla called me, breathless with rage. Jonathan, the HOA just filed an emergency complaint against you. Against me? I said, half laughing because it was so stupid it almost worked. They were accusing me of illegal construction, surveillance violations, threatening behavior, even implying I was mentally unstable because I moved to the woods for peace and quiet. They wanted a restraining order. Classic move, attack first to make the victim look like the problem. But here's the second twist, the one that broke the case wide open. I called in a favor from a former co-worker, Luis, a forensic mapping guy. I sent him the parcel map version history. He dug into the back-end logs and found someone tried to erase metadata but missed a mirror archive. The credentials used to upload the boundary update traced back to a device registered under the HOA vice president's name, Glenn Hastings. So it wasn't just Karen running her mouth. It was the board. It was coordinated. And when the sheriff's office finally got a full forensic dump from the arrested guy's phone, it was basically a confession in text messages. KJ and Glenn discussing wiping cameras, grabbing maps, no loose ends. We walked into court with a rolling suitcase full of evidence. Karen sat across the aisle looking smug, like she'd done this 100 times and watched people fold. Their attorney started the whole community preservation speech, painting me as some unstable hermit with too many cameras. Then Carla stood up and did what Carla does. She dropped the hammer. Drone footage. Trespass reports. Dead notary documents. The forged signature. The metadata trace. The arson attempt. And then the texts. The judge didn't even take a recess. Denied the restraining order on the spot. Ordered an immediate investigation into Green Hollow Preserve for criminal conspiracy and fraud. Issued an injunction barring any HOA member from contacting me or stepping onto my property. Karen's smirk didn't fade, it curdled. And once the county opened the records, it got uglier. Similar forged zoning adjustments. Similar fake notary seals. Similar boundary claims. Mine wasn't the only target. There were 5 properties they'd been quietly trying to absorb, and most of the owners were elderly or absentee. One woman, Patricia, had been paying HOA fines for years out of fear, only to find out her home had never been inside their jurisdiction. That's when the moral lesson hit me. And it wasn't some inspirational quote, it was a bitter little truth. A lot of power in this country isn't held by the strongest people, it's held by the people who are willing to weaponize paperwork, and who count on you being too tired, too polite, or too broke to fight back. They don't need to kick your door in if they can get you to sign your rights away in panic. And if they can't get your signature, sometimes they'll just forge it, and bet you won't notice until it's too late. But here's the part that felt like karma finally clocking in for its shift. The DA elevated it into a criminal case. Fraud, falsification of public records, unlawful surveillance, trespassing, and arson. Warrants got served. Karen's house was searched. Glenn's office got raided. A storage unit full of HOA files got seized. Maps with red lines creeping outward, forged stamps, notes on targets like it was a shopping list. One of their hired enforcers flipped and gave investigators everything. Names, voice recordings, receipts. The prosecution played audio in court where Karen literally said they needed my house gone before I dragged them into court. The jury didn't take long. Karen went away for a long time. Glenn took a deal and still did years. The HOA was dissolved. Assets frozen. And my civil case wrapped a couple months later. Damages awarded enough to cover legal fees, repairs, and send a very clear message to the next person who thinks they can steal land with a clipboard and a smile. My house still stands. Cameras are up. Signs 2 big ones. Private land. No HOA. No drones. No lies. And I'll be honest, I didn't win because I'm some superhero. I won because I documented everything. I didn't back down. I got help. And I refused to let embarrassment or fatigue make me quiet. They came for my silence. They got my full volume. So here's the question I still wrestle with. And I want you to wrestle with it too. Where's the line between defending yourself and becoming the kind of person you're fighting? If someone uses the system to attack you, do you have a moral obligation to stay civil, or is going scorched earth the only language bullies understand? Drop your take in the comments. Tell me what you think is right, what's too far, and if you've ever dealt with an HOA, a neighbor, or any little pocket of power that tried to push you around. And if you've got your own story, especially one where karma actually showed up, share it. I read them and trust me, you're not alone.